Good morning, everyone. It's Miss Angie, and today is Monday, April 27th, 2020. And today we're going to continue our story, Koo. Chapter 4, Officers. Koo was so distraught over Burr and numbly bewildered by her terrifying trip to the ground and back that she forgot all about looking inside Tilly's brown paper sack until late that evening. The sun had long since set and the sky was a chilly purple. In the rail yard, the big evening lamps were lit, bathing the tracks in yellow. Koo discovered 3 more exquisite donuts inside the sack. One was creamy white like clean feathers and dotted with perfect orange sprinkles. One was palest pink like a good sunrise, and the third was a rich, blackish brown. It could have been dirt, like the dirt that collected in the roof corners, but Koo knew otherwise. Her heart soared. Chocolate! Chocolate was rare. Pigeons didn't like it. They didn't even like carrying it in their beaks from the dumpster, and Ruhu made fun of her for asking for it. She'd have Tully's chocolate donut all to herself, she decided. Rare donut in hand, she wiggled out of the dovecot to sit on the roof ledge. She huddled under some newspaper and slowly licked the frosted top, looking out at the world beyond. She stared down at the wide gray ribbon and shuddered as a car zoomed over it. How much bigger and stranger and more terrifying the world was now that it had been this morning. Her head hurt just thinking about it. Cats, humans, tiny skies. How could Tilly keep Burr safe in such a world? Hoop had tried to soothe her by describing what she could of Tully, but Koo dwelled on Little Beak, one of the pigeons Tully had taken years ago who had never returned. She thought about the box Burr had disappeared into and the bend in the alley where Tully had vanished. She swallowed a chunk of donut. Where was he right now? Was he safe and warm? It was very cold outside. Was he in pain? She imagined him lying somewhere alone and hurting, abandoned by Tully, and lost her appetite. She looked toward the dovecot. The pigeons seemed to have forgotten about Burr. That was their way. The flock always mattered more than any one pigeon. Always had and always would. Koo tucked the half-finished donut back into the bag with the ones she planned to share with the flock for breakfast. She was about to shimmy inside the dovecot when she turned her back to look at the roof. It was exactly the same, but also somehow different. The moon had risen, full and merry, casting cool light over everything familiar. Red chair, pile of pebbles, tall weeds. Her eye fell on the solid, hulking tower that had always lurked in the center of the roof. One side had a reddish-orange rectangle set into it, and when she was bored, Koo often shoved bits of twigs and rocks through the mysterious small gaps that ran around it. When the roof's wildflowers bloomed, she liked to pick them and stick them into the gaps too. The white and yellow blossoms looked very pretty against the rust color. Now she recognized the rectangle. It was like the plywood-covered hole in the side of the factory above the crumbling steps. A door. Where did it go? Koo tiptoed toward it, her bare toes curling against the cold. She reached for the metal ball that stuck out from a stem on one side of it and tugged. Over the years, she had pushed and tugged on it so many times without anything happening. This time was no different. It did not budge. Suddenly, she felt very tired. Shivering, she hurried back to the dovecot and crawled into her nest. She stared out the dovecot's opening at the soft, blurry ridges of the skyline twinkling far in the distance. The building's starry little lights glowed brighter than the real stars scattered in the sky. She gazed at them for a long time. Different now, Koo whispered to no one in particular. Everything different. She watched tiny orbs of light glide high up in the sky on the flight paths she knew by heart. Strange birds, those were. Tonight she couldn't stop looking at them and wondering about things the pigeons couldn't quite explain. Human things. Packed tight in the shelves of the dovecot all around her, the flock slumbered. Koo had never in her life felt so alone. She had never felt so human. Many hours passed before she fell asleep. The next morning, Koo waited a long time in the alley. The sun came up over the sides of the building. New Tick-Tick and Hoop, who had accompanied her down to the ground with old Tick-Tick and Ruhu, grew restless and fluttered back up to the dovecot. Tully was very late today. Koo thought about trying to walk up the alley herself. Maybe Tully was just beyond the bend where the alley disappeared behind the buildings. Maybe Burr was there too. Maybe there were donuts. Koo stood up from the sunny patch of gravel where she'd been squatting. She took a few steps forward, then a few more. She was nearly at the corner when she heard Tully's voice. The healer was not alone. Ku could hear slamming sounds and other voices, deep ones. Human feet came crunching up the gravel. Heavy feet, not like Tully's at all. Ku scrambled back to the fence. The hair stood up along the back of her neck. She needed to hide. The pigeons sensed it too. More humans, said old Tick-Tick from her perch on the fence. Odd, this. Whole human flock, said Ruhu when he returned from scouting around the bend. Human flock's bad. Ku scampered back as far as she could into the bushes. Tilly's red hat caught on a thorny branch. She quickly took it off and stuck it down the front of her plastic romper. Luckily, there was an evergreen that never lost its dark green needles, and she was soon well hidden behind its scratchy bulk. Peering between the branches, she still had a decent view of the alley. Ku had thought Tully was large, but the two other humans coming down the alley with her were huge. They towered over Tully. They wore dark blue pants and shirts with many metallic glinting bits. Many more heavy-looking metal things dangled around their waist. One had a cracking metal box in its hand. You really shouldn't be back here in the first place, ma'am, one of the humans said. Feeding pigeons is not illegal, officer, said Tully. It's not, but this property belongs to the city. No trespassing. Okay, now I know. But the girl, Tully raised her hands in the air, palms up. I'm afraid she's been abandoned here, or she has a family that is not caring for her properly. She's filthy and neglected. Miss Tilly, you said she was about what, 11? Height, weight, race? Short, officer, plainly thin, white brownish matted hair, very suntanned, boyish, but I'm almost sure she's a girl. As I said, she doesn't seem to speak English. She just gobbled up the food I gave her like a stray dog. She hangs out in the alley here? You sure she's only 11? She might be even younger. Whoever is caring for her is doing a terrible job. I would take her in myself. Getting ahead of yourself there, sweetie. Fine, whatever, Tilly frowned. Just please look for her. It's much too cold for her to be out here in nothing but a plastic bag and the hat and scarf I gave her. One officer was holding a small rectangle and scribbling on it with a stick. We'll poke around, he said. She ran into the bushes when she got scared, said Tully, pointing directly to the place where Ku was hiding. Over there. The two strangers clomped and crunched across the gravel toward Ku. The few lingering pigeons heavied up and headed in a wave toward the roof. But Ku couldn't go with them. She had to stay put, still as no breeze, and hope these big scowling humans didn't see her. She almost made it, but just as the officers reached the fence, the crackling metal box one held in his hand suddenly began to speak. It had a voice, like a human. It took all Ku had inside her not to scream, but she did jump. The bush shook. Aha, cried Tully. She's there. Come out, Ku. It's safe. These policemen are here to help you. At the very same moment, a streak of gray fuzz shot up from another bush and right through the hole in the fence. Yowling, it zipped past the policeman and Tully and disappeared up the alley. It was a cat that had nearly eaten Burr, and for the first time, Ku was grateful for it. Are you sure you saw a kid, ma'am, not a cat or a raccoon or something? The two officers laughed. Tully did not laugh. She looked anxious. Of course I know a child from a wild animal, she said. Well, next time, call us as soon as you see her, or rabid raccoons or anything. Here's my card. One of the officers handed Tully a small, flat piece of paper. Or bring her to the precinct, if she'll come with you. Good luck with that, though. It sounds like she's a truant. A truant? Skipping school. There have been some car break-ins around here, and someone reported seeing a kid loitering near one of them. White thin, maybe it's the kid you saw. Listen, officer, said Tully. She is a child, all by herself. This is serious. You aren't going to search for her? The officers began to trudge back up the alley. Truly trailed behind. They continued to babble. None of it made sense, though Ku could muddle through some of the tones. Joking and impatient from two strangers, anxious and sad from Tully. We'll check tomorrow, okay? If you see her again, we can do a full search of the building, said one of the officers. So far, there haven't been any other reports, and no missing kids or teens fitting your description. But keep in touch with us, okay? We'll fill out a report in the cruiser. They vanished around the bend, and their voices faded. Ku let go of the branch she'd been clutching and realized she'd gripped it so hard she'd drawn blood. She licked her wound, watching the alley. Ku did not dare go down to the ground again, not later that day, until they returned alone, scattering seed and calling Ku's name over and over. Not the next day when more officers arrived and peered and shouted all over the alley, and even inside the building below her, hitting the fence with black sticks and barking into their crackling boxes. Nor did she go down in the days that followed, each colder than the last. When Tully appeared, looking sadder and sadder, and called Coo's name in a quieter and quieter voice. Coo mostly stayed cooped up in the dovecot. It felt safest. Chilled rain came, and she burrowed more deeply into her nest, trying hard not to think about Bert or her curiosity about Tully. She held out a crumb of hope for Bert. Hoop, the one who had been to the secret and mysterious place when the healer took sick birds, assured Coo again and again that Tully was a good human, and the gruff humans with their sticks and boxes had never appeared during Hoop's time with her. Safe with human, me, said Hoop. Dry, warm, foot-heeled, gentle human. Hungry there, you? Never, kind, the human. Maybe, snorted Ruhu. Just a human. Us? Really? Kick humans do. Always kick. Hush, Ruhu, said old Tick-Tick. Kind some humans. Coo, Tully, both very kind. It took a long time to heal, Hoop said. Many days and nights. Burr would be back, someday. Coo just had to wait. Chapter 5. Hunger. Gone, the pigeons said one cold morning a few days after Burr disappeared with Tully. The roof sparkled with new frost. They returned to the roof with no bagels or donuts or even bread rolls in their beaks. Dumpster gone. Resorting to pecking at the spills around the small bins on the sidewalks, they'd only found scraps, nothing worth hauling back for Coo. Hungry, me, said Pook, a particularly impatient yearling. Bagels, please? This wasn't the first time a dumpster had disappeared. Coo's stomach rumbled loudly just thinking about it. Long ago there had been a closer dumpster, one that yielded much more than bagels and donuts. It had bananas, bread, cupcakes, cheese, all in clear sacks that two pigeons working together could haul the short block back to the roof. Memories of those foods lived in Coo's memory like a distant summer. Coo had never seen any kind of dumpster in person, and the pigeons weren't particularly clear in describing how they looked, except that they were the same color as the roof. So she spent hours and hours imagining them. Big, shining, grayish clouds on the ground that spitted out delicious food. Until they didn't. One day the pigeons had gone to that dumpster, the one with such miraculous variety, and discovered it had vanished, flown away, dissolved. The days that followed had turned into weeks of gnawing, headache-making, frightening hunger, a long, terrible time spent living on nothing more than a few muffin crumbs from a sidewalk trash bin, or full of raw dough from an unreliable dumpster far away, before the pigeons found the new one, the bagel and donut one. Now that dumpster had vanished too. Coo's heart quakened. She tucked Tully's red hat snugly over her ears, then retied the brown scarf. Whenever she was worried, she rubbed the scarf's soft edge against her cheek, and it helped her calm down. Back tomorrow? She asked hopefully. One gone day. Not so bad. Dumpsters? No, said Ruhu. Gone now, gone always. Hush, said Hoop. Maybe. But Ruhu was right. The pigeons returned over and over, at all hours for days, but the bagel and donut dumpster had disappeared for good. Eat you, Ka dropped a mushy, blackish, yellow object at Coo's feet. A banana. She hadn't seen one in so long it was hard to remember what they tasted like. This one was brown and purple inside and nearly beginning to rot. Coo inhaled it. It was the first big meal she'd had in more than a week. Grateful me, she said between bites. Thank you, Ka. Searching hard for you, us, he said. Hungry too, me. Hungry all. Know it, me, Coo's cheeks burned. She stopped chewing and hastily pushed the last bits of banana towards Ka. Grateful me, very grateful. It wasn't like the flock to expend so much energy on just one member. Coo suddenly felt huge and helpless, like a ridiculously overgrown squab refusing to leave the nest. When Burr was around, she never felt this way, not once. He always reminded the rest of them how much she mattered and made her feel special. But Burr was gone, maybe forever, and hardly anyone else seemed to care or notice. Even new Tick-Tick was acting a little distant and tired. Hard work looking for food, she said when she brought Coo a soggy, flattened muffin one rainy morning a few days later. Can't eat seed, you? Really? Coo had long ago discovered that the seed Tilly scattered most days did nothing but give her tummy aches. The pigeons still tried bringing her some time from time, and she felt bad turning it down, especially when they had to look so hard for anything else. Half-gnawed bagels, torn and dried pizza slices, a few banana chunks. The flock flew farther and farther every day to find food for themselves. The most of the time, it was too far to bring anything back for Coo. One evening, new Tick-Tick dared to steal a craggy brown apple core from a squirrel in the rail yard, and Coo ate it gratefully, even though it tasted vile. She had stopped playing find food. No pigeon besides Burr was ever very encouraging about it. But now the others avoided her when she started. It was sad playing alone. Besides that, pretending about food was no fun when you wanted the real kind and couldn't have it. Looking at rocks that were supposed to be donuts made Coo's hunger pains worse. Miss Burr, me, she said wistfully. Find him, you, said New Tick Tick, down on the ground. Good food, too. What? Cat's there, cars there. Scary, no. Not scary, said New Tick Tick. Go on, you. Ask human, you, about food and Burr. Can't ask human, me, remember? Don't speak human. It confused New Tick Tick as much as it did Coo. If Coo was really a human, like Ruhu said, why couldn't she understand Tully? Pigeons never had trouble understanding other pigeons, even from different flocks. Coo puzzled over this again, rubbing her head, but it was hard to think when she was so hungry. Give you food anyway, Tully. New Tick Tick and the other pigeons knew the healer's name now. Show you Burr, too, her. Both humans, you. Go down. Don't want to, me. Coo thought of the strangers Tully had brought to the alley and shuddered. Starve on roof, you. Kyle landed next to her. All struggling, us. Get her own food, Coo, Ruhu said, hopping down next to Ka. Human she is. Remember? Coo stared at her hands. The air was frigid. Her fingers were thin and red. Ka wasn't mean like Ruhu, but he was stern. Not a squab, you, Ka said quietly. Time to get food like a big pigeon, you. The next morning, Coo stared over the edge of the roof, looking for Tully. The healer came less and less frequently these days. Coo was growing so weak it hurt to think about climbing down the fire escape. Her stomach was as dry and empty as a broken eggshell. At last, she heard Tully coming down the alley. She peeked over the side and watched her scatter the birdseed. Hungry, every last flock of member zoomed down to eat. Coo was alone on the roof. She leaned over the fire escape hesitatingly. Without New Tick Tick to encourage her, or Ka to nudge her, the trip down was daunting. Worse, she felt dizzy. She steadied herself and closed her eyes. Suddenly, she heard Tully's voice. Coo, is that you on the roof? I see your hat. Coo startled. All at once, her head felt as light as a plastic bag twirling in the wind. She sunk down against the low wall that ran around the roof and closed her eyes. Tully's voice sounded very far away. She thought about Burr and the other sick pigeons she'd known, how frightening it was to feel ill. She tried to call for her flock, but panic stole her voice. She lay curled in a ball for a long time. Eventually, Tully stopped calling for her. The flock returned from feasting in the alley. Most of them ignored her, but New Tick Tick and Hoop brought her some sweet crumbs they found a few blocks away. It was enough to revive her so she could stagger back to the dovecot. None of the other pigeons talked to her. With Burr gone, she had learned things about the flock and her place in it that she'd never known or wanted to know before. Some of it was going to be hard to forget. And that ends our 2 chapters for today. I hope you all have a great day, and we will continue our story tomorrow. Bye.